Who's our next witness?
Hi, my name is Carla Campbell. I'm from Menlo Park, and I'm going to try very hard not to repeat things that other people have said tonight. I know. One thing, I just wanted to thank you very, very much, Senator, for listening all these years. I've been coming to these things and watching, and concerns that we've brought up, you've paid attention to. You're asking the right questions. It's wonderful. Please keep asking them. My biggest concern in this whole business is local public transit. I understand that the funding is not supposed to go to local public transit. I'm concerned that in the process of this blended system, which frankly I don't really have a good image of, I feel a little bit like we're being asked to consent to a sort of pig in a poke here. But in all this, that ultimately we're going to wind up with not having anything left of our own public transit once the corridor's been used and everything else subsumes it. I've seen just in terms of our local transit where the baby bullet train, which hurries people from San Francisco to San Jose, came along, and suddenly local trains that stopped everywhere and actually served those of us who lived up and down the peninsula and went up and down the peninsula rather than to the extremes were eliminated, cut back, dropped, and not considered important. I use transit every single day. It's how I get where I go, and I'm not the only one. I would just like to think that when we're left, that the skeleton of what we currently have is not going to be totally subsumed by the blended system. And just to add very quickly that I'm one of the people who stands to lose my home. That is not my priority. Yeah, I care, but it's not my priority. My priority is that we're left with something that works for us and that we aren't just bookends that hold something important up on either end. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Don Ball, Bob Simmons, Gary Janssen, or Pam Farley? If not, Richard Brand, Larry Yelowitz, or Adrian Covert? Please come forward if you're still with us. And you will be followed by Kathy Hamilton, John Preston, and Gary Bailey.
I'm Larry Yelowitz from Sunnyvale. Most of the points I wanted to make have been made, but my topic sentence is, please pull the plug on this disaster. We heard a previous witness talk about the rule of three, but he didn't quite tie the ribbon. He didn't mention that we've had the rule of three from 33 billion to 100 billion in just 4 years. So if we look out just 12 years at this rate of growth, we're talking 2.7 trillion, and 12 years, I'm sure, is way below the time we're actually going to be seeing one seat on the train. So on behalf of myself as a taxpayer and my 5 grandchildren, all under age 7, I urge you to have some fiscal reality and reason and pull the plug. And I hope if we do get to the 2.7 trillion that Mr. Richard will come up with a better term than sticker shock. And I'd like to emphasize two previous points that people have made. One is that if we do go ahead with this high-speed rail, I would urge that it be open to all laborers, be they union members or otherwise, as a previous speaker mentioned. And I'd like to, I don't know if the Stanford report that a previous witness referred to is the same one that I'm looking at, but I have something called 12 misleading statements on finance and economic issues in the CHSRA's draft 2012 business plan by a Stanford professor and some others. It may or may not be the same report. And in conclusion, I would say that based on the points I've made, I think the only high-speed rail switch that the taxpayers are going to see is the bait and switch that we've heard referred to. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian Covert, Richard Brand, Kathy Hamilton, John Preston, and Gary Bailey. If any one of you is here, just step right up, please. Let me ask my staff to help you with that microphone, please. I think it's a little tenuous. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Simitian. Thank you for your continued vigilance on this important subject of high-speed rail. You've done a great job in exposing issues and problems. But right now, there is nothing that has changed. There is still tremendous amounts of independent experts that have said that the program lacks a solid direction and it's risky. We are past tipping points, watershed moments, and the authority has crossed the line that appears to be in the sand since it keeps moving. Richard White, professor at Stanford, called high-speed rail in a recent article of The Economist the Vietnam of transport, easy to begin and difficult and expensive to stop. There are many people have said what I was going to say, but I have sent you this entire outline that I have done. The ridership is a major problem. The establishment of an internal ridership review panel is a problem. 2 of the 5 members worked on the previous model. 1 member has done consulting work for Cambridge. That's not the definition of independent. Per the peer review group, we need an independent vetting of the work done by this panel, and we need a new independent model under the auspices of a truly independent source. The other thing that I will say, I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff, is that I want you to read about the enabling legislation 3034 asks for 2 members with expert representation from agencies providing intercity and commuter passenger rail service. The law should be clarified not to allow those actively sitting on those types of agencies which might obtain favorable treatment or funds for their organization. They should not be allowed to sit.
And let me just ask you to close right there, Ms. Hamilton. We're past your time.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No worries. Thanks so much. You stuck around for 4 hours and 45 minutes, so thank you. John Preston, Gary Bailey, Adrian Covert, Richard Brand, Jeff Wyndham, Rosemary, I believe it's Malbesh, John Malbesh, Don McKenzie, and Carlfreiburg. If you're any one of those people, come up and introduce yourself.
Good evening, Senator. Thank you for having this hearing. My name is Adrian Covert. I'm with the Bay Area Council. In 2008, 7 million Californians voted in favor of high-speed rail as a means to meet, as a way to meet the needs of a growing state. However, in the months and years that followed, many citizens, and including apparently the Almighty, became frustrated with a process that they saw as insensitive and unresponsive, and the project's future came into question. The California High-Speed Rail Authority has since listened to critics and made important changes that will be reflected in the revised business plan. We tonight gathered here to learn and comment more about those plans. First and foremost, the authority has adopted a blended system that Peninsula leaders proposed as a way to avoid unwanted impacts on local communities. It's worth mentioning that the blended system would also cost less. That's good for the Peninsula and it's good for the state. The citizens spoke and the authority has listened and revised its plan. The second major change is the timing. The business plan will now include early investment on the Peninsula so that Caltrain electrification can be realized within perhaps as soon as 5 years. This is important because an electrified Caltrain would provide more frequent service, attracting riders, and decreasing congestion along 101. It's also important because an electrified Caltrain would reduce both pollution and noise generated from the current lumbering diesel fleet. Also, a modernized Caltrain would help put the system's operational finances on sound footing by increasing ridership and eliminating the need for expensive diesel fuel. Again, citizens have spoken, authority has listened, and revised the plan. These changes represent a tremendous opportunity, and the Caltrain corridor is one of the most economically prosperous corridors in the entire country, yet Peninsula employees face some of the worst commutes in the nation.
Mr. Covert, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
And the last sentence is that it's the stance of the Bay Area Council that the blended approach, which would modernize Caltrain and stabilize its operations, be adopted, and I think that it deserves our enthusiastic support. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Next witness, welcome.
My name is Coralfreiburg, Senator Simitian. There was a lot of talk about risk and avoidance earlier this evening. I want to mention that between 1960 and year 2010, over 2 million people were killed in auto accidents in our country. In Japan, in the same period, high-speed rail, 0 people killed. Public safety is a major concern of government. A lot of people that might have been here are not here today because of highways. They might have gotten here just by chance, lived these later 50 years to be here to speak tonight. So risk and avoidance, there's risk for money, but there's also risk of our lives when we have to risk banging into trucks and other large items on the freeways. If we take President Obama's $53 billion, that represents 0.3% of 1% of the gross national product. President Eisenhower, back in 1956, budgeted $25 billion for the freeway system. At that time, that was 6% of the GDP. If we were to take 6% of today's GDP, we're looking at close to $1 trillion. That's, to me, very worthwhile for public safety. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We're going to go up to the balcony now.
Hi, I'm Gary Bailey from Sunnyvale. Senator Simitian, I think I can see that these long public hearings must be the most fun part of your job. I want to congratulate you for trying to make sure, for working to make sure that high-speed rail is done correctly and done the right way. I think that's very important. Echoing what one earlier speaker said, I have 2 points. One is there could be an opportunity perhaps for some revenue for high-speed rail from high-speed freight by attaching a freight car to the end of a passenger train or finding a time like 3 a.m. when a freight train could not interfere with passenger service. And maybe some railroad companies would be interested enough in exploring new market areas that they might even be willing to help fund some construction. It might be worth looking into. As we've also heard from several people who have experienced high-speed rail in other countries can see what a benefit it is, and it will be to the California and the people in California. It'll certainly be a long-term boost to the economy long after the construction jobs are gone. It'll be a benefit to travelers going north and south. It'll be a benefit to the health of Californians because it will greatly reduce health-damaging pollution because it will markedly decrease the number of cars and airplanes going north to south in our state, as it has done in other countries where high-speed rail is. And it will help us reduce our dependence on foreign oil. And so I think it's something that we need to do because also I doubt if we can easily reach the state's goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions without high-speed rail. So thanks very much for your efforts, and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
And who do we have still with us?
Thank you. Gary Janssen, I live in San Jose. Senator Simitian, please do the right thing and help us kill this project, or at least get it on the ballot without a signature gathering effort, which is agony. It was mentioned earlier tonight, Mr. Will Kempton has to catch a plane. Why didn't he take a bus? Why didn't he take public transit? The other two senators are up there driving to Sacramento. Why aren't they on the Capitol train right now? Why aren't they on public transit? This is a further illustration that public transit's a nice idea for those people, but not us. It's there. It just doesn't work very well, and it's way too expensive. Okay, this current notion that it won't do any good today to start drilling for oil is a flat-out lie. The sooner we start drilling for oil, the sooner we can get our supply of oil, a domestic supply. When we voted on this measure, diesel was probably $1.89 a gallon. It's going to be about $6 at the end of the summer, I hear. It's going to take a lot of diesel to run the Caterpillars and the Jackhammers to build this rail line. Another issue, 3 rail lines on the peninsula? Are you kidding? Caltrain, BART, high-speed rail? Something's wrong with that picture. And don't tear down the east half of the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. That thing could be used for a rail line, could be retrofitted, it's perfectly good. There's vehicles driving on it right now at this very moment. And for 23 years since the 89 earthquake, it's been safe, otherwise we would have shut it down. Use that to not ignore the city of Oakland, which is ignored in this whole project, right? Run it over to Oakland, down to the 580 corridor, which we already own, taxpayers own. It's a big, fat, wide corridor, into the Central Valley, up to Sacramento, down to Los Angeles, if you really want to do something a little more efficient. Final point. I have no faith whatsoever that this project, contrary to what was said tonight, will ever need a public subsidy. It will.
Thank you for your comments. Let me ask if John and Rosemary Malbesh are still here. Don McKenzie, John Preston, Richard Brand, Jeff Wyndham, Nancy Schwiegel, Charles Volz, Frank Oliveira, Rob Means, Tian Harder, and Roy Mize. If you're here, please step up. Welcome.
I'm representing the Advanced Transit Association, and the idea, the concept of high-speed rail is really appealing. We're highly supportive of it. Having something that's electrified, clean, to get around the state, to reduce our CO2 emissions, all great. The technology that we're locked into due to the legislation is the problem here, we believe. People have complained about the expense. They've complained about the possibility of injuries, of people committing suicide and disturbing the train flow. There's a lot of different reasons that this particular technology may not make as much sense today as it did 30, 40, and 50 years ago. We're suggesting a number of different options that are elevated, so they're not getting in the way of stuff, but they're small scale, so they're much less expensive to build and to operate. They're low cost, and like PRT, Personal Rapid Transit, only faster. So what I'd like to do is drop off a couple of sheets of paper here that show 3 examples of technologies that are able to achieve 150 plus mile per hour speeds, but they're doing it on a much, much smaller imprint, both physically on the ground and in the noise that they generate.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness.
Senator, my name is Frank Oliveira. I'm with Citizens for California High-Speed Rail Accountability. I've traveled from the center of nowhere to speak to you today.
And Mr. Oliveira, let me just say, I think you know I've never used that phrase, and I can assure you I never will.
That's okay.
Please go right ahead.
I happen to be in the middle of the ICS, which is the train to nowhere. Bullet statement. I want to talk to you about you, your responsibilities, high-speed rail, and Prop 1A. Sir, you volunteered for this job to protect the public, to do the public's bidding. That's why you serve, and I respect your service. As far as your responsibility, you have a responsibility to follow the law. You even make laws or participate in the process. Prop 1A, we're not building Prop 1A. We're building something else. If we're not building Prop 1A, why are we talking about using money that Prop 1A allocates? Because we're not building Prop 1A. High-speed rail. Simply put, high-speed rail has a future in the state of California. We are not opposed to high-speed rail. We're opposed to the way that the project has been conceived and how it's being designed and executed. I told you, high-speed rail is not a bad idea, but this project is built on a bad foundation and will end up being a bad product. I'm bringing to you, and I'll give this to your sergeant, a map suitable for wall hanging that shows you all of the places along the construction route that oppose the California High-Speed Rail's plan as designed. 2/3 of the ICS happen to fall within those areas. Thank you for hearing me out tonight.
Thank you for making the trip, and thank you for your comments. Next witness. Tell us who you are, please.
Yeah, my name is Tian Harder. I live in Mountain View. And thank you for this opportunity to speak and all the things I've heard tonight. I really want to ride this train, you know. I quit flying when I realized that it's a huge carbon footprint. So now when I go to LA, I take the Greyhound, I take the train. It takes a while. I get a ride from somebody sometimes. I really would like to ride this train. But it seems like when we voted for it, we were voting for $4 billion, and now we're talking about $120 billion. That's a distressing amount of, like, inflation. And I sort of wish it wasn't like that. But I want to ride the train because I think oil is going to continue to be expensive for as long as I'm likely to see. And I think a good train system would ameliorate the impacts of that. So I want to ride the train. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness.
Roy Mize, Mountain View. 65 years a rail fan, 50 years as supporter of transit and rail projects that are well planned and well produced. My career, almost all of it, was doing high-tech, expensive, large, complex R&D projects. The two I'm most proud of was I was the lead planner on reprocessing space shuttle processing. If you don't think that's complex, the high-speed rail is simple by comparison. My last job was with a satellite startup company. Business operations in 100 countries, 28 ground stations, 19 countries. It went bankrupt. Excellent technical support, terrible business plan. High-speed rail has a terrible business plan, and if it brought to me what I've seen so far of the construction and the planning and the statistical support underneath what little planning there is, I'd fire every single person on the board as well as all of the construction people as well. It's really poor across the board. Some comments were made earlier. The software engineer, he said, what about the kinds of technologies that are now going? Well, the post office is going bankrupt. People are using Twitter. They're using Facebook. They're using email. Nobody writes a letter anymore. My daughter used to be a consultant, traveled all over the world. Now she works 3 days a week out of her bedroom for companies that way. Travel is down. That means the statistical underpinnings of the traffic projections really haven't considered technology and the changes. Now, I'm going to ask a question. I've tried to get it answered many, many times, including a private meeting with 2 city council people, one from Palo Alto, one from Mountain View, and some other people, with a former member of the High-Speed Rail Board regarding statistics.
And
Any way you look at the
you're out of time, sir, so I'm going to let you ask that question, though. Let's get it on the record.
All right. Any way you look at the statistics, no matter who does them, they're based on Southern California to San Francisco. The largest jobs nexus in Northern California is Silicon Valley. By any measure, you've got to consider that at least half of the traffic will come to San Jose or Silicon Valley. So why do we need 4 tracks or a blended approach all the way into San Francisco? A single track dedicated to high-speed rail, widen out the existing Caltrain tracks with positive train control, fewer trains, and good scheduling, and you've got a system that people can support.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Charles Volz, Nancy Schwagel, still here? If not, Bill, I believe it's pronounced Moniz, Eric Sond from San Carlos, Jeff Wolfold, John Hultgren, Anthony Intervea, Joe Hackett, Andy Chow, Dan Anderson, and that's a repeat. There we go.
My name is Eric Son from San Carlos. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
If high-speed rail is built, in my opinion, it will be obsolete for most of its lifetime. I'm holding my cell phone, my smartphone. 20 years ago, this did not exist. Now, many of us rely on this kind of technology. So technology changes a lot in 20 years. California desperately does need advances in transportation, but the most significant advances in transportation will come from information technology. This will take many forms, but one in particular will impact high-speed rail that has not been discussed or considered here tonight. We are starting to see that computer-controlled, self-driving cars are not just science fiction. They are a reality. They're being developed here in Mountain View, in fact. It's very likely that by 2030, caravans or platoons of automatic cars drafting each other, bumper to bumper, will be able to take us down I-5 or any other highway in the state at higher speed, more safely, more economically, and with far greater usage of highway capacity than we have now. So obviously this will impact the possible usage of any high-speed rail system, and the projected usage levels of high-speed rail would have to take into consideration this kind of change in our transportation infrastructure. So I would like to ask that when you make the decision about whether to proceed with high-speed rail or not, that you consider whether a very different forms of infrastructure investment and government support other than rail will be better suited to a future where information technology, such as self-driving cars, has transformed the way we travel in the state. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness, step right up, please, and tell us who you are.
Well, my name's Anthony Cariah from Mountain View. So thank you again. I was at Palo Alto meeting a year ago, and I told you it was a study, and it still is. So that's one of the good things. It's progressed a little. So at any rate, I didn't pay attention to it much for the past 2 years, and I did some research yesterday, actually, try to get the latest set of documents. So the Federal Rail Authority certainly has the most mature set of documents in their library about the high-speed rail infrastructure in the United States. And I guess you know that I don't know what you meant by a blended system, but there's always been a 3-tier of service and legislative guidance that was put out for the call in 2009. Unfortunately, Prop 1A only looked at one part of it, which was the core line between Los Angeles and San Francisco. The routing was never really supported up the peninsula, and it's still not. And that's, as you can see, it's mired in the judicial with CEQA. And who knows when that's going to break. So I would feel you're remiss, this goes back to your schedule discussion, to, I'll put it this way, rubber stamp something based on schedule when it's been 3.5 years to get something to move. So, now that the ARRA has expired, we've seen some documents come out, and it's still up in the air. So 8 projects are left. 6 projects are left in the United States for high-speed rail. California is the most mature, if you could believe that. So, that's where we are in the United States. I think if we're going to do anything, it appears the Fed is looking for some sort of technology push to boost the American-made trains and American-made rails. 2 years ago, we heard, well, we're buying them from overseas with California money. So, something's going to have to change. And clearly today there was discussion of change. I'm going to wait until we see the proposals, and I can't see how you're going to fund it this year. I just don't see how you're going to do a bulk of it. 50% of the funding you'd be remiss to do it. The proposal is not mature.
Thank you very much. Who's our next witness, please?
Dan Anderson. Thank you, Senator Simitian and distinguished panelists. Relevant to the Central Valley, this high-speed train can be done significantly solar power. The California aqueduct goes more or less parallel with the I-5 corridor to LA. It's about as wide as this, or a little bit wider. About 7 feet high, metal, lightweight, strong, about 250 miles, together with the other canals, peripheral, mostly the northern side, you get right about 1,000 megawatt constantly. That's every day of the year. It's an average. That's a phenomenal amount of solar energy. It's the cleanest renewable source of electricity. The panels, they are made in California, some in the Bay Area, mostly in different places. The sun is like Governor Jerry Brown said a few months ago last year. He said, in this subject, he goes for California sunshine. California sunshine can be the main power for California high-speed rail, high-speed rail. So that, along with many other, the reason why it goes over the aqueduct, it takes no farmland. You get all of that electricity without using any farmland. Go with solar energy is the best way. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And who's our next witness?
I'm Andy Chow. Good morning, Senator. So
Good
it's way after midnight. So I'm with the Bay Rail Alliance, and we as the Bay Rail Alliance, we have been rail advocacy on the peninsula for almost 30 years, and our top priorities is Caltrain electrification and extension of Caltrain into downtown San Francisco. We are also interested in the financial health of Caltrain as well. We are really pleased about regarding the blended approach as suggested by you and your allies on the in Congress and then in the Assembly. I think that the blended solution is the way to go to tackle this otherwise very complicated project. And then we're also very interested in the early investment that has been suggested right now by the High-Speed Rail Authority and MTC. And right now, Caltrain is experiencing a huge ridership growth, despite the fact that we have high unemployment in this region for a number of years. But at the same time, the number, even with the reduction of service on Caltrain, the ridership has been growing, and that we need additional investments on Caltrain that would be compatible with high-speed rail. Those projects include positive train control and electrification. And we also believe that the early investment would provide a balanced investment all over the state, and then would provide immediate benefit, especially in the metropolitan area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Moniz, Jeff Wolfeld, John Hultgren, Joe Hackett. I think we've lost them. Glenn Jelinian, Carol Winchester, Mark Thomas, John Melnichuk, Edmund Peterson, and a duplicate. Welcome. Tell me who you are.
My name is Mark Thomas. I'm from here in Mountain View. As we can all agree, the HSR has serious problems and great need. There are no alternate solutions I've heard to HSR, except what I heard earlier from a gentleman talking about the personalized rapid transit. I'm here to back him up, and I think that PRT will solve almost all of the problems and create very few new problems. As you probably know, PRT is just two-person cars running on a monorail. The infrastructure for this would be far cheaper. It's estimated that the tracks could be built between San Francisco and LA for somewhere around $5 billion. That means that you already have the money to build this. You would not need any huge amount of money such as you're proposing. As Senator Dirksen said, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, pretty soon you're talking real money. I've been a big fan of the future for all my life. I think that personalized rapid transit is the future. I've ridden high-speed trains in Japan and Europe. They're nice, but they suffer from all the problems that trains suffer from. They run on a schedule. There are far distances between the stations. Personalized rapid transit would have stations scattered about that you could get on and get off very easily. We saw the problems with men having to leave earlier to get home. They could ride on personalized rapid transit if it were available because it would not have a separate schedule. High-speed rail is just another patch on a patchwork system that we have here. We have trains like Caltrain, we have cars, we have planes, we have buses, we have light rail, we have BART. Personalized rapid transit could cover all of those and take them over. It would be cheaper and easier to build and quicker to build, so we could be building it much sooner. We wouldn't be looking at 10, 20, or more years into the future. Trains are based on 200-plus-year-old technology. We're basically just making them faster and a little slicker. Personalized rapid transit would solve that. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Who's our next witness? Come right forward.
My name's Edmund Peterson. I'm a mechanical engineer. I've heard some very interesting remarks made about the technology tonight. I live in Palo Alto, but I'm not a NIMBY. I believe in high-speed rail, obviously properly done. A current airplane trip from SFO to LAX can easily take 5 hours door to door. A couple of San Francisco Chronicle reporters tried that before 9/11, and the guy that drove down actually beat the guy that flew down. High-speed rail would be a huge success. That's why Southwest Airlines is spending against it. France and California, by the way, another interesting remark was made. They have roughly the same population density, and the Paris to Marseille corridor actually connects city with fewer inhabitants. France has about 60 million, California 40, France 200,000 square miles, California 158. I've been on the TGV. It's unbelievable. It's just beyond my wildest dreams. Big projects are almost always opposed. That includes the French TGV and the Paris RER. That's the equivalent of BART, not the little metro in the inner city. There's a lot of opposition to them, but they are huge successes now that they've built. They try and expand it. It's that popular. So let's not let the mentality that stopped BART on the peninsula from stopping high-speed rail. Well done. Intelligent and studied risk is okay. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Don't do stupid risk, but study it intelligently, and otherwise all these Silicon Valley entrepreneurs wouldn't have been able to do what they've done. Finally, $42 billion worth of federal highway subsidies, in addition to the gas tax, were spent last year. 1 year, $42 billion. If you divide that by 8, that's about $5 billion roughly. If we just put $5 billion a year into high-speed rail over 15, 20 years, hey, same as what the highway's costing us now in this state.
And your last comment is, sir?
Yeah. Amtrak received $1.5 billion, and finally, the $1 billion initially budgeted for the New Bay Bridge is now well over $6 billion. So it isn't just high-speed rail that's ballooning up. It's kind of a case of the pot calling the kettle black.
Thank you very much.
I'll leave this with your assistant here.
Thank you. And our next witness is?
I'm John Melnichuk. I'm in Palo Alto. I'm one of your constituents. And thank you so much for another hearing and a long evening, along with Senators Lowenthal and your other colleagues. I'm a neighbor of Caltrain in Palo Alto. I'm about 180 feet from the tracks, and I have to say, they are the worst neighbors. And I can't imagine that they can solve their funding problems by trying to make a deal with the Metro Transit Authority and a kind of bookend system. I'm not sure that I would trust High-Speed Rail Authority on the basis of their management in the last 3.5 years. And it's amazing to me that our legislators have had such trouble getting oversight and answers from the committees. I would say I would love to have high-speed rail, but not like this. And we should go back to the drawing board. Fire the consultants who haven't been doing the job and they haven't been helping us at all. It's been money down the drain. And perhaps the current leadership of the High-Speed Rail Authority will do better than the previous leadership, but I'm not sure about that. I don't think they've got enough time to meet their deadlines. So what I'd like to say is also, in the idea of safety, there's about 116 deaths in the last 8 years or 9 years on the Caltrain tracks. I don't see how faster trains with electrification are going to make it safer for the kids crossing the streets there. That's all I got to say. Thank you. And thanks for your service.
Thank you very much. Glenn Gillenow, Carol Winchester, Kimball Smith, Scott Stanton, Dr. R.G. Stewart, and Sula Bloor. And if you come right up and just tell us who you are, that would be great. You're going to be followed by Lee Kenna, Stephanie Munoz, and Terry Turman, if they're still here, and Sue Liao. So let's start with Kimball Smith, Scott Stanton, Dr. R.G. Stewart, and Sula Bloor. Welcome.
I guess it's morning.
It is.
So good morning.
Good morning.
I'd first like to thank you for this opportunity to find out more about what's happening. I have just two major comments. The first is, for years, I've read in the papers about kids and adults being killed by Caltrain and the A train running from Sacramento. And to me, the solution is clearly to put it in a trench so that the visual and the acoustic impact is minimized. And a good example of that is the Central Expressway as it cuts through Sunnyvale. It's down low, you don't see it, you don't hear it, and to me, that would be essential in dealing with many of the problems which have been brought up this evening. The second point that I'd like to bring up is this matter of putting the route through the Central Valley. I think someone, perhaps you mentioned earlier, Governor Brown's desire for high-speed transit between Frisco and LA. The straight line connecting those two is the way to achieve a minimum transit time. And a route that would follow more like 101 does from San Jose to LA would be more in accord with a straight line than going to Bakersfield and then to Palmdale. So what was not explained tonight and is still a mystery to me is how the route was ever slated through the Central Valley in the first place, and what politics went into it, and whether, for instance, if you asked Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer and Nancy Pelosi to have dinner with the President of the United States one night, perhaps you could convince them to have the route changed to one which would be more a straight line between here, LA, and I think eventually San Diego.
Thank you. And can you give me your name so I can check off your card, please?
Bob Stewart from Los Altos.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. Folks, we're coming into the home stretch here. Scott Stanton, Sula Bloor, Kimball Smith, Lee Kenna, Stephanie Munoz, Terry Turman, and our last speaker is Sue Liao. If you're one of those folks, please step right up if you can.
Good morning, Joe. I'm Stephanie Munoz. You know me. High-speed rail may be Mr. Right, but he's not Mr. Here. Because the reasons that are given in support are not valid. The first reason is the jobs. The jobs are not jobs for the people here who are unemployed. They're jobs for people all over the country who come in with large contracting companies and come in for a comparatively brief part of time. The faster they got the rail done, the shorter their job is. We need permanent jobs with that money. We need teachers, nurses, solar makers, and other alternate energy, affordable housing, paper pushers who will get our veterans, the benefits they deserve. The second is the money. I've always wondered why it should cost so much. It might be possible that a few years from now, when the people who own the options on the farmland between here and there have their options run out, this high-speed rail might not cost quite so much. And the third, of course, is the vote. However, the main thing is that a high-speed rail, which is tied to running roughshod over 90% of the San Francisco metropolitan area, is not going to fly. You can't do it, and it won't be helpful to the cause of high-speed rail in the long run because it doesn't go up the rest of the west coast of the United States. It doesn't go up to Seattle. I went to school in Seattle. I went to college in Seattle. I discovered that San Francisco is the crown of a peninsula. That to get to Seattle, you've got to get on the ferry boat and go across, and then you get to go up to Seattle. You'd be better off
Munoz,
just
you're just
going
out
to
of
San
time.
Jose.
Can I ask for one last sentence, please?
Right. Well, what should my last sentence be? Yes, I also have traveled on the TGF and on many other trains in France, and those trains were set up with the stations at the edges of the metropolitan area. They did not go through don't go through overland on the whole city. So that's very different from our situation in which the towns follow each other, one after another in a slurb, and for the convenience of a few out of the 800,000 fixed residents of San Francisco, the millions who live on the peninsula and San Jose are to have their lives disrupted.
Thank you for that very comprehensive last sentence, Ms. Munoz. Who's our last witness here?
I'm Carrie Turman of Mountain View.
Thank you for your endurance, Mr.
I
Turman.
want to say, am I the last one?
I believe you are. We're going to find out here in a minute.
Okay. For half a dozen years, I've observed the Foothill De Anza trustees and watched annual cuts in budget of California for higher education and for K through 12 too. And it's really been painful to watch those cuts. Now, if you look at the economics of high-speed rail around the world, most of them do indeed pay operating expenses, with a notable exception of Taiwan, which falls below that. But none of them of those high-speed rails have ever repaid their capital expenses. Now, if you look at this in terms of education, it costs, the state of California spends $10,000 a year on students at California State University. The capital expense of a high-speed rail is putting 2 million people through 4 years of California State University. In other words, you're saying to have high-speed rail, a couple of million people are going to have to give up their college education. And that's the way to think of the cost of high-speed rail. It's, we really want to tell 2 million people that no, there's no money for your college education. And so that's in terms that you can understand. Now, there's also, I know, the UC and the community college and the K through 12 and so on, so it's spread around. But really, there is a big, and I've seen what happens in California. It's always education, always gets cut every time there's a budget crunch. Somehow it never escapes. Politicians will talk about they won't cut education, but they always do.
Thank you for your comments. Sue Liao, Lee Kenna. Now, those are all the cards I have. Have I overlooked anyone inadvertently? If not, then I think I'm going to say thank you to all of you. You hung in, and we're this is one of the few times I can say for sure thank you to all parties for putting all of this together. A lot of folks had to help, including the City of Mountain View, Senate staff, my own staff, and my colleagues who came. Thank you to the representatives from the High Speed Rail Authority who are still with us. Thank you all for your very thoughtful comments. And as I started to say, I know I can say without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.